Hey guys, this is John and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about and show you how to overhaul a bottom bracket or the crank bearings on a vintage bicycle. Let's get started. Put on the workbench the tools we're going to be using today. The first one here is your bottom bracket tool. This is for your fixed cup. This is for your lock ring on your adjustable side. This is a crank puller, obviously a crank wrench. In this particular bike, a red spanner with 2 pins. Then I got this thing. I got this idea from a guy that wants me to save my knuckles from damage. And I'll show you what we're going to do with this. Keep in mind, your bike, depending on the vintage, may have a bottom bracket like this. It's actually sealed. You have a 1-piece sealed bottom bracket or 2-piece. This is all one. Here's the drive side on this side here. And you're just going to pull the whole thing out and replace it. There's no overhauling this thing. Now, each bottom bracket is threaded, obviously, and there's 3 basic threads that you're going to see. One would be English, Italian, or French, and they have different numbers here. And this particular one is English. And I'm going to leave a link below to the Sheldon Brown list of different bottom brackets, and it's going to tell you which way to turn the cup, but I'll hit on that a little bit here. Okay, so now we're in need of a bike to overhaul. How about, let's do the Team Wheaties. I may have done it already, I'm not sure. Let's just put her on the rack. We have our victim on the rack. It is a 1988 Schwinn Paramount, dressed up in Wheaties colors. Let's get started. This particular one, you need a pin spanner to take off the dust cap. It's already loose, so I'll just spin that off. This particular Dura-ace crank requires a 14mm wrench, much to my surprise. The next tool we're going to use is the Park CCP 22 crank removal tool or crank puller, and this is going to thread into the crank, and as you tighten this is going to push on the spindle and yank the crank out. I don't think there's a good hack for this, guys. If you don't have this tool, you're going to be using a mallet and a piece of wood. I don't recommend doing it. So get this tool. Make sure there's a little bit of oil on the threads before you thread it in. It should go in smoothly, never force it, and make sure you get at least 5 threads inside the crank. That way, when you use the tool, it doesn't pull all the threads out of the crank. All right, I'm going to thread that in. It's going to bottom out. You're going to have to exert some pressure. Give it a yank. All right, and as you pull this out, there's going to be a little bit of chain tension. Make sure you drop the chain lightly. Now, I almost forgot to warn you. If you take that crank bolt out and you don't take that washer out and you try using that puller, you're in big heaping trouble, because that's just going to be pushing on a washer. You'll end up yanking all these threads out and ruining your crank. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our lock ring removal tool. We're going to put it on the lock ring, and this will be a right-handed thread. As a matter of fact, I believe all left-handed cups or non-drive cups are right-handed threads. Whoop, look at that. That came off a little easier than I thought. Spin that baby off. Next, take your, in this particular case, a red spanner. It's got little pins here. And we're going to put it in the cup, and once again, right-handed thread, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Actually, this is coming out really smooth. All right, there's your cup. There's your bearing. This particular one has cage bearings, and it looks like I did not overhaul this bike when I purchased it. That looks like ancient grease. This particular one, and most of them should have a bottom bracket sheath. This protects you from any kind of crud that may come down to seat tube, rust, such. And you pull out your spindle. Here you go. Now inside there's a fixed cup and a bearing. We're going to get that from the other side. If you don't have all the correct tools, there's a couple things you could do. Some people do take a flat-bladed screwdriver and a mallet and gently tap to move the lock ring. Also too, if you don't have a spanner wrench, some people have done the same and use the like a small Phillips to move the cup. Now obviously I recommend using the correct tools, but if not, if you don't have them, there you go. Now we're going to remove the fixed cup. Now they call it a fixed cup because you tighten it to the frame, there's no adjustability to it. Now this particular cup is a left-handed thread, which means it's lefty tighty, righty loosey. It's opposite. Now if it was Italian or French, I believe they're right-handed. So you would be tightening it and loosening it as normally, as you normally would. Now this particular tool here, this fits perfectly. Now if you don't have this, you could use a wrench, but I tell you what, you might be busting some knuckles. It's pretty thin here. And because of that, I'm gonna go right away, I'm gonna use a special tool that someone showed me works really well, so this doesn't come loose and I don't bust my knuckles. So here's my wrench, I'm gonna put it on. I'm gonna be going clockwise with this one, but I don't want my hand to fall off, and I don't want this little pin here to scrape my pinky, which it normally would. So I'm gonna put this big nut, bolt, and washer through, and that's gonna keep it from falling off. Not too tight now. A little bit of free play. All right, now I'm going to give this a crank. I'm not sure how hard I have to push, but here we go. Hey, that broke off pretty easy. Let's get rid of this nut and bolt. And my knuckles were saved. Looks like she's coming out nice and easy. Here we go. This is our cup. Remove the bearings. Now these are all caged, they're all together. And same with the fixed cup as well. Now these are actually 1/4-inch bearings that are put into a ring, and they make it easy to take out and put back in. Now I know for a fact that these bearings might have 100 miles on them, maybe 100 miles on them. And when you clean them up, you take a look at them, inspect them closely, and look for pits. Now, if you have an older bottom bracket, I'd just say put new bearings in it. That simple. Now, some of these vintage ones might be hard to find, so, you know, use your discernment. You could still pack them loose as well. You could put loose bearings in here with grease, and you'll be just fine. Now, let's inspect the cups. Let's wipe all the grease out. You could use a solvent as well, but if you look closely, look at the surface where the bearings touch and look for pits. That looks that's just grease. But yeah, look for pits in there. And this one's clean, and the reason why it's clean is it probably doesn't have any miles on it. Now, if it's got some light pitting, you have a choice. You could either replace it, which you could, you know, go on eBay or something and find some replacement parts. You could also replace it with a sealed cartridge. Some people do that. It's really up to you. Let's clean these out. Pretty. Now your bottom bracket shell, you can wipe that out if you like. You see there's some old grease in there, old dirt. Wouldn't hurt to take that out. Wouldn't hurt also to spray some solvent in there to clean that out. But you don't want that totally dry. We're going to put a little bit of grease on the threads. I love this stuff. Clean Streak. We're going to use this to make sure the bearings are free of the old grease. You can tell they're getting clean. They're starting to ring. Now, some people don't like the fact that I use paper towels, But I tell you what, when you use a regular rag, everything snags on the rag. So that's why I use paper towels. I prefer to set the grease into the cup and then put the bearing in. Let's do that. Look at this. Won't be pretty. Now make sure that when you put this in, the cage section, see how you see the ring there versus how it's open? Cage section goes down. That way, your spindle could roll freely. I stick my finger in, pull it back out, take the extra grease, smear it around. Let's do the same on this side. All right, now that might be a little too much, but it's not going to matter. I'm going to make sure there's a little bit here in the threads. Now, don't need a lot. It'll spread around as you tighten the cup. Let's put this fixed cup back in. What some people do is they run the cup backwards and they hear it click and then you go forward. That's how you know. Now, if you have to force this, you're probably cross-threading it. Let's put this all the way in. Put the wrench on and tighten her up. How tight do you do it? I'd say about 2 grunts. So if you grunt twice, it's probably tight enough. You know, I actually forgot to tell you to check the bearing surfaces on your spindle. Now this is smooth. Sometimes they look pitted. When these things pit, they look like a bad weld. And this one looks smooth. It also tells me there's more than 100 miles on it. All right, let's put her in. Now your spindle is longer on one side than the other, from here to here and here to here. The longer side normally is the drive side. So we're going to stick that in. Should roll smooth on your on the bearing. Next, put your sheath in. Should fit really nicely in there. And then your adjustable cup. Now this one is right-handed thread. Oh, got lucky, it caught right away because it's nicely threaded. Some people run it backwards until you hear a click, then you try going forward. Once again, never force it. Now there's a good chance that it might be a tighter fit, and that's okay. You know, as long as you're not forcing it, you're all right. So this one here is going really smooth. But my greasy hands are not getting traction on it, so let's fast forward. Okay, so it looks like she's in there. It's not fine-tuned yet. Let's take the lock ring, put her on there, and you got to get it to catch. I'm going to run it backwards, then forwards. Here we go. Okay, so I wiped her down. Now we're going to do the fine adjustment. The other side, the fixed cup, is tightened all the way to the frame. There's no adjustability. We're going to adjust the bearing by moving this cup clockwise or counterclockwise. Then we're going to lock it down with the ring. Now, when you lock it down with the ring, it actually changes the adjustment slightly, because as you tighten the ring, it pulls the cup out. Very little, but it does. So the idea here is to make the cup as loose as possible, meaning counterclockwise, as loose as possible without having any free play here. And that takes a little bit of work. So right now, it feels really smooth. But I'm going to loosen it just a little bit. I'm going to feel it. Still feels smooth. A little smoother, actually. And now I'm going to loosen it a little bit more. Very smooth. I'm getting a hair free play, just a hair. If I put a noise tube, like ding, 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 ding. So I'm going to tighten it just a hair, like that. And now I'm going to tighten the lock ring. When I tighten the lock ring, I'm going to hold on to the cup with the spanner. Whoop, it moved. Well, let's see how it is. I'm going to try loosening that up just a little bit. Ready? We're going to loosen it just a hair. I'm going to tighten the ring again while holding onto the cup. Let's try that. Ooh, like butter, smooth. Oh, there's free play. But that happens. I don't care how good you are at this. It takes some trial and error. So watch this. I'm going to move it just a hair. Just a hair. Now, sometimes you won't feel the free play until you get the crank on. That's a pain in the ass, but it's going to happen. Oh. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Yeah, when your hand slips off the tool, you throw your camera across the room. So where are we? Let's check it out. It's smooth. No free play. We're in great shape. I'm going to make sure that this is snug. And this time I'm not going to throw the camera across the room. Yep, it's snug. What happened before is this slipped off and away you went. Now we're ready to put the cranks back on. What I'm going to do next is a little controversial. Some people don't like it. But I'm just going to put a tiny bit, just a light touch of grease on the spindle. And the reason why is if that's too sticky, you're going to get a false tightness and you won't really have a perfectly tight crank. Also, I'll make sure my crank bolts have a little bit of grease on them too. This is a good opportunity to make sure that your cranks are nice and clean. Clean off your chain rings. And then when that's done, put her on and away you go. Crank bolt. Not used to doing this for camera. Crank it down. Now some people ask how much to tighten this. I don't have a torque wrench. I've been doing this forever. I would say 2 hard grunts, but I'm going to try to put the torque spec written down below, right there. And put the dust cap back on. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The last thing you would do is that you take your crank, move it back and forth. Even though I didn't feel free play earlier, check for it again because it could still be loose. It could give you a false sense. So, yeah, it feels good. Rolls nice and smooth. We're in great shape. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. I don't normally do how-to videos, but I'm learning. If you want any other suggestions on what you could do and when you're overhauling a bottom bracket, just look down in the comments section below. There's plenty of people that'll correct me and add little tidbits, and which is pretty good. You know, we could use that. Anyways, please check out my other videos. I have all kinds of videos, a couple how-tos, but mostly just kind of reviewing bikes and builds, things like that. And if you have any comments or questions about the channel or things that you'd like to see on the channel, please let me know in the comments section below as well. Hey guys, hit that little like button. It'll only take you a second. It'll help me out a lot. And also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you next video.